You're listening to Upgrade Your Health and Wellbeing podcast. Take care of your health and change your habits for the better.
Welcome to the next episode, Upgrade Your Health and Wellbeing. Today we are going to talk about one of the most important factors in nutrition. That is the new pyramid. Oh yeah, it's a very controversial topic. So the new nutrition pyramid 2025 to 2030 shows a major shift in evidence-based nutrition due to several factors which we are going to discuss in a minute. We see the fundamental changes to the official US dietary guidelines and the new nutrition pyramid for 2025 to 2030. And this is, we need to bear in mind that this is not a minor update because it represents a profound paradigm shift in how science in general understands the relationship between food, metabolism and also chronic disease. And for decades, nutrition guidelines focus primarily on individual nutrients, calories, fats, carbohydrates and vitamins. And the assumption was very simple, right? If nutrient targets were met, the specific form of the food mattered less. But today, that assumption in a way has changed. And it has changed significantly.
So what are the basics of the food pyramid?
That's a very good question indeed. So we are going to focus on the main assumptions, right? Today, that assumption has changed, as I said, because modern evidence now clearly shows that the degree of food processing itself plays a central role in health outcomes, independent of calorie intake or nutrient composition as such. So this is why one of the most significant changes in the new guidelines is the explicit recommendation to avoid, first of all, highly processed foods, such as packaged snacks, ready-to-eat meals, refined carbohydrates, and ultra-processed products, because these foods are now recognized as major drivers of metabolic dysfunction, chronic inflammation, insulin resistance, and long-term disease risk. And in contrast, the new pyramid prioritizes minimally processed whole foods as the foundation of nutrition. And another major shift concerns added sugars. And the guidelines now strongly recommend avoiding sugar-sweetened beverages entirely and limiting added sugars to very small amounts, no more than approximately 10 grams per meal. And even more importantly, Mariusz, the recommendations now state that children should ideally consume zero added sugars.
What are the consequences of such high sugar consumption for the body?
This reflects growing evidence that excessive sugar intake generally disrupts metabolic regulation. It contributes to fatty liver disease. It also impairs insulin sensitivity and increases cardiovascular risk. But these changes go even further, Mariusz. For the first time, the guidelines explicitly recommend limiting artificial additives, including artificial sweeteners, synthetic dyes, preservatives, and artificial flavoring agents. So this recommendation reflects emerging research showing that these compounds may affect glucose metabolism and alter the gut microbiome and influence inflammatory pathways.
And how does this relate to carbohydrates?
Another important shift concerns carbohydrates, since you mentioned them, because for decades, bread, processed cereals and low-fiber carbohydrate products, they formed a major part of the standard diet. And the new guidelines now clearly recommend prioritizing fiber-rich whole grains while substantially reducing refined carbohydrate intake. And this reflects strong evidence that fiber, first of all, improves insulin sensitivity, supports microbiome health, can reduce inflammation, and lowers the risk of cardiovascular disease.
It seems that in the new food pyramid, fats and their position are quite controversial. Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Oh yeah, the position of fats has drastically changed. Perhaps one of the most surprising and important updates concerns dietary fats. Because for many years, Mariusz, nutrition guidelines promoted low-fat diets based on the assumption that dietary fat was inherently harmful. And today, that perspective has evolved. So the new recommendations now emphasize the importance of healthy fats from whole food sources such as eggs, fish, nuts, seeds, olive oil, avocado, and even full-fat dairy products without added sugars. This is important. So this reflects strong scientific evidence showing that natural fats, when consumed in whole food form, do not inherently increase cardiometabolic risk and may actually support metabolic health, hormone production, and cellular function.
We talked about carbohydrates, but protein is also very important from the perspective of longevity. What are the recommendations regarding protein?
First of all, let's start with another major uptake related to protein. Recommendations suggest a protein intake of approximately 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. This is significantly higher than previous recommendations and reflects growing evidence that adequate protein intake supports, first of all, muscle mass, metabolic stability, hormonal balance, and healthy aging. So protein is now recognized not just as a structural nutrient, but as a key regulator of metabolic health and longevity. And finally, the visual structure of the nutrition pyramid itself has changed, because instead of focusing primarily on grains at the base, as older pyramids did, the new model is organized around three equally important pillars: minimally processed protein and healthy fat sources, right? Vegetables and fruits, and fiber-rich whole grains. And this new structure reflects a deeper understanding of nutrition as an integrated biological system rather than a simple calorie equation.
What does this new pyramid look like in light of scientific research?
Well, what makes these changes especially important is that they align with the strongest modern evidence from clinical trials and long-term population studies. We need to bear in mind this fact. So these studies consistently show that dietary patterns rich in whole, minimally processed foods are associated with lower risk of cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, neurodegenerative diseases, and premature mortality, right? And in contrast, diets high in ultra-processed foods are strongly associated with worse metabolic health and increased disease risk. In other words, Mariusz, the quality of food matters just as much, if not more, than the quantity. So this represents a fundamental shift from previous nutrition towards the current system. So the foundation of health is not built on processed foods, but on real whole foods.
The new food pyramid may be causing a lot of controversy, but in fact it makes certain things more realistic, because it's better to eat a steak, if of course you eat meat, than to eat a processed product. And that's the point, right, Arek?
I couldn't agree more. Thank you very much for today.
Upgrade your health and well-being podcast. Take care of your health and change your habits for the better.